Like some YouTubers would say, if you made it this far, if you made it to the end, to the very end, comment an emoji. I don't know what emoji yet, so I'm gonna put it up on the screen. Yes, comment this emoji so I know you made it to this very end. But that being said, I gotta tell you guys something.
Let me tell you something. All right. Let me tell you something.
In the previous clip, I mentioned that I'm starting a podcast and I am going to prioritize that podcast, and the podcast is going to mean a lot to me. I never really introduced the podcast, and I did it on purpose because obviously that was not like me making that video wasn't me trying to promote my podcast. Like I didn't want that to be the main focus. So that's why I'm making this the bonus clip. I already said goodbye. If you guys tuned out, you tuned out. But if you're still here, you guys gonna get the tea. Not really the tea, but you guys are gonna get more information about. I didn't really introduce the podcast. I mentioned I'm gonna make a podcast, but I never said what it will be about. Okay, this podcast, it's not gonna be the podcast we listen to. It's not gonna be the podcast that's on social media. It's not gonna be a podcast that y'all gonna make a meme about. Oh, we need to get rid of all these podcast microphones. It's not gonna be one of those podcasts. It's not gonna be one of those podcasts, but this podcast is really important to me, and I think it should be important to you as well, to be honest.
A few moments later.
So this podcast is not something like that has never been done before. I don't know how to really put it in better words. It just has never been successful. Like people who have started it just never finished it. And I know that, I mean, I understand it's gonna be hard because it's very niche. It's a very niche podcast. It's not like these podcasts that people are making that they're able to talk about everything and anything, or able to talk about the things that are happening on social media. No, this podcast is very niche, and it's like technically this podcast can be done in 10 episodes and that's it. But I've decided to kind of make a twist to it. All right, so I know I've been teasing you guys saying this podcast. You're probably just asking, what is this podcast? I'm gonna tell you guys. Drum roll, please. So this podcast that I'm starting is gonna be a podcast of me talking about sickle cell. So if you know me personally, you know I have sickle cell. Even if you don't know me personally, I think it is something that I still bring up to people who are around me, that I have sickle cell. I feel like a lot of people still don't know what sickle cell is. And recently, oh my gosh, not to bash my friends and my family, so both friends and family, but like recently I've been thinking about this. I was kind of asking this to myself. Hypothetically, if there was a question to be asked my friends to kind of, I don't know how to say this to not sound so like, it is hypothetical. Like, I feel like I would never do this to my friends and family, but I'm just saying, like, so if somebody was to go up to my friends and ask them a question, and if they were to answer the question right, that means that they are a true friend. And if they didn't answer the question right, it's problematic, our friendship. So basically the question is, if somebody was to ask my friends, what is sickle cell? Unfortunately, I know a lot of them, I'm not gonna say all of them, but a lot of them are not gonna be able to answer that question correctly. I feel like a lot of their answers will be, oh, I have a close friend that has sickle cell. Oh, I know somebody that has sickle cell. Oh yeah, my brother's girlfriend, cousin, friend has sickle cell. Y'all, that's another question that's being asked. What is sickle cell? And I always take accountability. Sometimes I feel like I overtake accountability. So I feel like it is my fault that my friends and some of my families don't know what sickle cell is. I feel like I could have sat them down and explained it to them rather than, like, sometimes they are put in a situation that they really don't know what to do. And I feel like, you know, it should have been my duty to kind of sit them down like, hey, this is what sickle cell is, this and that, instead of them just, you know, hearing that I'm in the hospital or see me in pain. But I also think that they could have sat themselves down and done the research. But again, it is not like, listen, it never really bothered me until, like, I don't know, the question just been, I don't even know how to put it, but it never really bothered me if they didn't know what sickle cell is. Like, I know what it is, and I'm an advocate of myself. But we're in 2024 now. I feel like a lot of you guys should know, at least the people in my life should know what sickle cell is. So with that being said, this podcast, right? I'm embarrassed to admit, but I've been planning this podcast. It's been a year and 2 months now. So 2022, October, November 2022 is when I bought my microphone, my podcast mic. I started planning, I started doing my research because I realized that there's a lot of things I don't know about sickle cell. So I started doing my research, and here we are today. On the 1 year of me planning this podcast, I did put out a trailer. I think I'm just gonna leave it up. I'm very self-conscious, and I'm listening to that trailer and I was like, ew, I would not sit down and listen to it. But I digress. It's up, and I'm happy it's up, so that means it's only up from here, okay? But with that being said, I feel like you guys will get a lot out of this podcast. And I say you guys because even if you think you don't know anybody that has sickle cell, you are wrong, okay? I will get into details about that. Before I forget to mention, yes, I did say that my podcast is going to be about sickle cell, but what can I really be talking about, you know? So what I've decided to do is kind of split the podcast into 2 ways. So one, I want to give you guys like textbook definition, textbook information about sickle cell. However, I want to be able to give it to you guys that in a way that you guys can digest it. So you guys are probably wondering, oh, like, what will I be talking about so much that I need to make a podcast? Because I do intend to have a lot of episodes. No pun intended. Hey, you know about sickle cell, you know what I just said right now. No pun intended. But I do plan on making a lot of episodes, and you're probably wondering, well, what can I be talking about sickle cell? Like, literally, I can just make 5 episodes and cover everything. But basically, what I plan on doing with the podcast is this. I want to be able to split the podcast in like 2 ways. The first way is giving you guys like textbook information, textbook definition of sickle cell. However, I want to give it to you guys, well, I want to deliver it in a way that you guys can digest it. I noticed that in textbooks and like on Google and whatever, there's jargons.
What?
Being used that a lot of people don't understand, and I'm like thinking about like my family right now, like they wouldn't understand what this means, or there's jargon.
What are you talking about, man?
Being used that like, I don't know, it's very specific to sickle cell. So I'm gonna be able to explain things that make sense to everybody. And the second way I plan on doing the episode is to get really personal. I am like just me in real life. Like I'm a very open book. I talk about a lot of things. I have no shame in talking about my experience on things. So I want to be able to share my experience, and but yeah, basically, yeah, I want to be able to share my experience and oh yeah, address any concerns and questions that you guys have. Again, if you are somebody who just found out you have sickle cell, I can help you through it. I was once there where I found out I had sickle cell, and my family found out, and we just didn't know what to do. We didn't have the information. We just went to the hospital. I got medicated. I got out and did that at least 3 times a year. I want to be able to give you guys everything that can help you answer that question, what is sickle cell? Okay, so friends and family out there, hey, I might hit you with a question, so be prepared. Just kidding. But yeah, basically that's what my podcast is gonna be about. Thank you.